Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Very good morning. I believe it's still morning. Yes, it is. I hope you are being edutained in this amazing conference. So I hope you're learning and having fun and getting the opportunity to meet. That's the whole idea. Thank you for attending this panel discussion on AI's effect on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Murtada, thank you for the introductions. So since the introductions have been done, let's get immediately into it. Now, the topic of AI in general in Oman may be a bit nascent, and then comes AI on diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, which is, just starting. So instead of getting into it directly, what I would like to do is I would like to request my esteemed panel members to scope out what really are the challenges and possibly the opportunities and risks as well with DEI in general, with AI or without AI, in Oman and in the region. So perhaps, Asma, you can start us off with scoping it out. What are the challenges and the opportunities on diversity, equity, and inclusiveness in Oman and the region?
Well, let me maybe start by talking about why is DE&I important, even before adding A&I as an element to it. And if you think about diversity, inclusion, equity, you're really talking about, an imperative business requirement for businesses today and businesses in the future. In fact, there is quite a lot of research done by McKinsey and other consultants that basically says that companies that have more diverse leadership, specifically more gender diverse leadership, are actually more likely to outperform. And therefore, there is a big business case for diversity and inclusion. There is also another research that basically also says that companies with more diverse board of directors are also going to achieve better results in their corporate social responsibility reports.
Right.
Now, once you have a really good, social corporate responsibility report, you're basically positioning that organization a good corporate citizen. Now, as a client, as a customer, when you look at an organization and you see it as a good corporate citizen, it is a company that you want to make business with.
Right.
It is a company that you want to buy from if you're a client or a customer. It is a business that you want to partner with. And therefore, there is no debate that companies with good DE&I, companies who are diverse, companies who are inclusive, companies who pay attention to equity are actually more likely to outperform. They're more likely to basically produce more and have better productivity. Now, if we talk about, that is the business part, but then if you add, the kind of the dilemma, yeah? So there is no business debate about it. The dilemma is that, unfortunately, we're still far away from that. That's a reality. We're far away from having an optimum inclusive environment in many of our corporations. We try to attempt to it, but we are still a little bit, we're not really fully moving the needle in the right direction.
Indeed.
If we think about, an inclusive workforce, we're still far away from it. And this is not only in Oman. I think this is quite, a global phenomena as well. This is something that companies are conscious of, but they are still, trying to move the agenda in the right direction. Now, having that belief that this is something important is key, whether AI is part of it or not. So if you put in the AI element, of course, it's going to accelerate. Yeah, it's going to accelerate the performance towards DE&I. And the reason for it is because it's going to equip you with data. Yeah, data that will drive insights that will then allow you to say, I'm not really making a good progress in this direction.
Indeed.
And therefore, I need to actually do something about it. However, data is data unless you do something about it, right?
Absolutely.
So if you as an organization have a belief that if I have an inclusive environment, if I have a gender balance organization, if I have an equitable where I can actually provide equal opportunities for different people, for different cultures, for different, you can go on and go on and go on, then you can then do something with AI. But AI itself, without the belief, without a conviction that it matters, will not take you far. So that's my insight.
That's indeed very comprehensive. Thank you for that, Asma. I would like to ask a few questions on perhaps on the risks of AI. Maybe Joe is best placed to do that. But Joe, before I get to you, Your Excellency, Maali Doctor, thank you very much for joining us. Can you hear us?
Yes, صباح الخير عامر، صباح الخير الجميع. Good morning, everybody.
Sabah al-khair. Thank you very much for taking time of your very busy schedule. I know you're attending the government summit in Dubai, so luckily you're on the same time zone. But thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to ask you, before I move to Joe with the risks, what is the scene like in Lebanon? I know Lebanon is quite challenged at the current time, but mashallah, you folks have shown resilience throughout whatever time there is, yani. What is the scene like in Lebanon? And generally speaking, from your experience, what regulatory measures need to be taken, on the DE&I, again, still even without AI?
Sure. Thank you, Amir, and thank you for having me in this very important panel, and of course in this fantastic conference. Lebanon is just a typical developing nation struggling with a lot of issues, a lot of challenges. And I think it's typical to what we would expect or see in many countries in the global south, in developing and middle income countries who have a lot of challenges. And among them is the digitization and the drive towards more and more digitization, particularly speaking from my current position in government, digitization of government services, moving towards more and more smart government is a challenge. And there are three challenges here. And perhaps, again, as I mentioned, they're not typical for Lebanon. They're perhaps universal in many developing nations and in the global south in general. First, you need, the right infrastructure. Still, we have challenges accessing speedy internet. The fiber optics hasn't yet been developed to all parts of the country, although there's a huge development here, but still there's a way to go in this regard. Electricity has been a big challenge, so this is basic. But speaking about basics, we have also to acknowledge that many countries in the world still have challenges around, in speed internet, fast internet, electricity. And I think I saw a figure that internet penetration in Africa, for example, has only reached last year 36%. So, there's a long way, and these need to be put forward when we discuss AI, digitization, and the drive towards this in the developing world. Secondly, and this is, I think the most important and the crucial thing is data itself and the way it's being managed. So yes, of course, there's a lot of data being available here and there, big data, users' data from government, from the market, and so on. But management of this data, or the way we garner and organize the data in a way that can be useful for the AI system or the AI world to make it useful, is still a challenge. So we're still a step behind in terms of the way we need to organize the data and protect the data and make it more available. And thirdly, the ecosystem itself needs a lot of work, where we need to start from from schools, universities, and so on. I'm not showing a gloomy picture, I'm just showing the reality. But yet, with those challenges, we have great opportunities. We have really great opportunities, particularly to leapfrog and learn from what other nations are doing. Issues of technology transfer are key in many developing matters, including environment, climate change, health, education, agriculture. So we need to stress that developing nations, although they have a lot of challenges, yet there is a huge opportunity to learn from us being developed and leapfrog, in particularly in sectors that are much needed. Food security and agriculture, climate change and climate action, health, education. These are key that can, can we move in them in adopting gradually digitization and artificial intelligence.
Fabulous. Shukran, Doctor. Thanks for that input and insight. You certainly have, priorities on the table for the government to consider. You spoke about data, and Asma, you spoke about data as well. And I would actually like to now move to Joe and ask him, all right, well, what's the risk now with this data that is expected to be processed by AI to make decisions on DEI?
I think in terms of risk, where you often hear most people discuss AI is these large sweeping statements on the future of humanity and the difficulties that maybe it's going to have around job displacement or even threats to the future of humanity itself. But in realistic terms, and especially in relationship to data, I think there's probably two major risks that every company is going to have to wrestle with and face and plan for. The first is bias, and the second is privacy. On the topic of bias, when most software is created, or really all software, almost all software up until this point, it is about task completion. It is not referencing any previous knowledge. It is simply a tool to help augment a certain task. This is one of the first times that we've seen software being built where it's augmenting a task, but where it has knowledge built into it. And that knowledge is obviously collected from various points on the internet, various books, and all of this information is written with inherent bias. So when companies bring in AI, and they bring in AI tools to their businesses and their companies, understanding that they need to train these tools, they need to train these models, they need to understand that the data they put in is going to help them with the data that comes out of this. So in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, understanding that the basics that they get out of the box is going to be biased by default. And you have to work to adjust that. So where most pieces of software, you're going to think about rollout, deployment, you're going to think about education, training. In this case, you're going to have to think about how do you train these models in order to get the right output that you want for the country and the culture and the information that you want to do with that. The second part, the privacy aspect. So that was bias, privacy. So much of DE&I you can cross-reference with everybody in this room in terms of HR, which is often very sensitive information. And there was a nice conversation yesterday where people sometimes forget that when you deploy AI tools into your company and you start to ingest information into these tools, that information may be able to be accessed by other people. So in terms of keeping records private, in terms of keeping a level of privacy around personal information, it's quite important to understand how you're deploying these tools so that you don't end up in difficult situations with DE&I and that you get the outcomes that you want. Indeed. So I think those are the two areas.
Yes, thank you. No, thanks for summing it up very well. I want to move on and talk about money a little, which seems to be everyone's favorite topic. And Ayad, you're the CFO of OIA. I want to know if we as a nation, or even generally, even in the surrounding nations, how much investment is going into AI, generally speaking? And then I'll have a follow-up question on that as well.
Thanks, Amr. With regards to investments, there are different investments at different components of AI in general. globally, we're talking about potential investments around of $15 trillion in the next 8 years. Globally. There are some reports of investments up to $330 billion in 2025, $100 billion more than what we had in 2022.
Globally again.
Yes, so the numbers are astronomical.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me consume that. How many trillions did you say?
15 trillions, that is more than the output of China and India combined
Put together.
today. Yeah?
Okay, so just get hold of that number, all right? Okay.
So the implication of what is coming is in the numbers.
Indeed.
When people know what is coming is transformational, it is, a lot of people say it's equivalent to the introduction of internet. So since the introduction of internet, probably one of the biggest transformations we will see coming is AI. And to say that these numbers are big, actually it's, probably they could be bigger than what people are reporting today. If you look at the investment side, and specifically talking about sovereign wealth funds,
Yes.
some of the sovereign wealth funds reported record profits in 2023, primarily driven by AI.
Is that right?
So if you look at the asset class, which is AI asset class, you're talking about companies like Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Meta, and others. Some of them have doubled and tripled within a year. And if you look at the trend, probably we are at early stage. This is not a recommendation to go and invest in specific stocks, but we are probably at the early stage in the investment world as far as AI goes. Now, what is really driving this, and why do people see that something transformational is going to come? It's been a number of years that we've been talking about big data. Now the use cases for the big data is basically getting through the new technologies which are coming along. The microchip business, all of these are improving, and the improvements are not incremental. They are step changes in the way things are done. Hence, over the next 8 years, we will see that the use cases of AI is coming to almost everything we do. Specifically when it comes to DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think I'd like to touch on that from investment perspective.
Please do.
It was only a few months back, the president of the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund warned 8,000 or 9,000 businesses they own that if you don't make a move now, you probably will be phased out of business in a few years' time. And it did not come as a remark, it came as a warning. So ultimately, when you talk about that, as well as you talk about corporate governance, the ESG policies, these are all ultimately will have a component of E&I. Yeah? So I think, let me highlight more on the diversity. A lot of people talk about diversity. The very first thing which comes in mind is gender. Yeah?
Yes.
Which is, but
That's the first thing
I
on people's
believe
mind.
diversity goes way beyond that. It's the diversity of thought process. Do you have different people who think differently or not? It's diversity of age. Do you have all of them who are in their 60s, or is it a mixed age?
What's wrong with people in 60s? Yeah.
There are still people in the 60s, yeah. So I think we need to be careful on the definition of diversity and inclusiveness, and how is it going to be impacted, because the impact of AI on these different groups will be different as well.
Indeed.
The impact AI will make on different jobs, whether they are process-driven or judgment-driven, etc., it will be different. The impact of AI on different populations. I mean, we just heard the minister, His Excellency the Minister, mentioning that in the third or developing world, still the internet access is not there. So the impact on those will be limited. But then the benefits of AI will impact the same groups as in a good way, as much as it probably will impact them in an adverse way. And the difference here is in skilling, upskilling, and making people aware of what is coming.
Indeed.
If you're, I'm from finance, if you're an accountant within my domain or my profession, you really need to to know that a large part of accounting will be done by AI. So
Yes.
as a group, so even diversity in job groups and what you're doing is important to look at when we look at the impact of AI.
Yeah,
which is coming.
indeed. No, and we heard yesterday throughout the day that people with less literacy on digital tools are being able to do more and more. I think the famous example yesterday was someone's mom who's 85 who can do more and more things now with their laptops. All right, thank you very much, Ayad. But what I really wanted to know from you is how much is Oman, if you're at leisure to speak about that, how much is Oman investing? And are we investing in Omani organizations that do AI?
So first, in terms of investments, as in to make a return, definitely, different funds are investing within Oman.
Okay,
we
good.
are, I would say, heavily invested in AI globally.
Okay.
Whether in public markets, private markets, etc. So we are heavily invested.
So we will get a piece of the cake
we
as that grows.
Definitely are.
Okay.
In terms of returns on investment, and not only us, our neighbors are probably even more invested given the size of their funds in AI. So we're not missing out.
Right.
In that sense. However, as a country, are we really investing in the technology side of AI and preparing the ecosystem internally? This is something which probably we could do more.
Mm-hmm.
Today, how much are people aware of AI? Only the awareness side of AI, how AI is going to impact them, how they're going. It is something probably we're yet to invest more as a country on. When it comes to developing components or the software side, is something yet. I know there are certain investments. People are talking about 10 million, 20 million, but this is still not really serious number. But I think the opportunity is there. We need to ride the wave. It is coming, and it's coming in a big way over the next few years. And there is no time to still think about strategy around it or build papers around it. We need to get to the go and get involved in it.
Indeed, indeed. Right, shukran. Mali Doctor, I would like to ask you a question on how do you pay attention to, say, hiring issues. We're talking about DEI and AI's effect on DEIs, but let's just talk about the basics, yeah? Do you have any policy or any regulation on hiring, gender diversity or pay equity? Do you have anything of that, any policy or regulation?
Dr. Yassin, I think you are muted. You need to unmute your...
Yes, sure. Thank you. Sorry, I was. Thank you, Amir, for the question. In the governmental sector, in the public sector, it's all governed by the Civil Service Board. So we treat everybody equally in terms of recruitment. There's a system of, through the National Administration Institute, where we put staff in certain capacity building courses and training, and then they go through the hierarchy. So there's no, everybody is treated equally, but I have to say in Lebanon, when it comes to the senior positions, we still apply a quota system for the communities. That's not related to gender or experience or age. You help to pick the best, but you have to divide the top senior positions among the Lebanese communities with their confessional background. So this is the only quota system we have. But by and large, the public sector has been attracting more women recently than men, particularly in middle and increasingly senior jobs. Judiciary, for example, as a case in point, has been in the last 10 years attracting more women than men. I think soon we'll have more women in the judiciary than men, as judges, as prosecutors, and so on. Education for many years actually attracted more women than men. So it's not, there's no quota system as such in Lebanon for gender or for any other identity groups, except for confessional identity when it comes to the senior positions.
Indeed. All right. Thank
And
you.
we hope to change the system and make it more merit-based for everybody. And we're working on this, but it's going to take time to reach the senior positions in Lebanon to be all merit-based.
Tamam, shukran. Indeed, you have that extra challenge, Doctor, and and thanks for your input on that.
But this is for the public sector. For the private sector, it's totally different. It's the typical merit-based system, open for everybody, whether in education, in healthcare, in IT, and tourism, and other sectors. So it's the typical system. And last year we passed a law also to prohibit also any harassment in the public in the workplace. So this is also an updated system following some of the more developed nations in this regard.
Yes, indeed, because I mean, before the government, you're in the education sector, and حضرتك أيضا رئيس مركز عصام فارس للدراسات الاقتصادية في الجامعة الأمريكية في بيروت. So I would imagine in the education sector at the university, it is indeed very merit-based. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, even in government, don't get me wrong, it's all merit-based. But when it comes to senior positions, I mean, the undersecretaries, the chief of police, chief of army, and so on, these are still divided by the. We need to have some representation for the communities in Lebanon.
Indeed. Okay. So, a few years ago, I was invited to a women's conference. There was the awards for best performers within Omani females. And I was requested to join on a panel discussion like this. And my colleague and a good friend, Aisha Al-Kharousi, asked me a question. And she said, Amir, you are a headhunter and a recruiter, in competence we do that. So, how do you look at this issue of diversity? And I must say that I was in the presence of about 350 very powerful women. So I was kind of scared for my life.
So you should.
But I mustered up enough guts, and I told her, listen, Aisha, from a headhunter's point of view, from an executive searcher's point of view, I give out the best fit. It is up to the organization to think about the diversity. Your headhunter will give you who the best fit for the job description you've provided them with is. I left in one piece, and I'm fine now. But, I mean, from a major employer like Shell, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I'm glad you got to ask that question, so it gives you ammunition to think differently, Amir. Let me maybe go back to putting something into perspective before I talk about what Shell is doing and what other organizations are doing, and maybe going back to what Joe was talking about some of the risks that are, included in augmenting what we do with AI. So a good example of kind of like a bias because of data that you use, which are usually historical data, is what Amazon actually did. So Amazon basically applied an algorithm to help them with shortlisting and screening CVs. And what happened is that they used data that was with them for application that happened 10 years ago. So they took a 10-year set, and then they applied that, and they used that as a content to build their algorithm. And what happened is they realized that the system or the tool started discriminating against women. And it wasn't intended, but because the data set that they used was applicants that were majority men, the repetitive kind of usage of the men kind of segment of that data set allowed or enabled the system to detect more men as the ones who will be screened and will be shortlisted, and therefore women kind of got kind of discriminated against, not intentionally, but that's how the system was built. And therefore, it goes back to the whole point around what kind of auditing kind of mechanism that you need to do to enable a good AI system that will allow you to decrease the bias, yeah?
Oh, okay.
And by the way, if you take Amazon example aside, actually also the World Economic Forum, they've done quite a bit of study around it, and they said quite a number of AI tools that are involved in hiring also discriminate, and they kind of used a certain percentage, it discriminates by 8% in terms of gender diversity or gender balance. And the reason is going back to the data set that were actually used. And hence, it just basically tells us that it's very important that when we look at data sets, that we look at it with an eye of caution, that we look at it with an eye of inclusion, and that we look at it with an eye of human intervention. We need to balance things out, yeah?
So that's very useful insight, but then, Joe, I'm coming to you with the next
Sure.
question on the technical matter behind what Asma has just contributed. But isn't AI supposed to do exactly that? Look at it with an eye of caution. That's one thing. And isn't AI kind of the culprit to begin with, because the code was written by a certain category of beings?
Yeah.
So then, as a result, should it be, slowed down and re-looked at, or shall we just continue not avoiding technology to prosper?
It's a great question, and I'll try to give an example of exactly what you're talking about in terms of the data and why the training for these models can be so problematic, but they can also be so great in terms of what they can do for diversity and inclusion. So to give you an example, if I take Shell, and I go back maybe in the year 2000, and I get the data from Shell, and I look at all that data, and I say, what makes a successful executive at Shell? I'm going to guess the data is going to tell me, well, it's probably a man. It's a Dutch man, so it's probably around 183 centimeters tall, right? Not at one point is it going to say, well, a woman is going to be successful. Not at one point is it going to say anybody of color is going to be successful. But that's not the fault of the system, right? We literally have taken what existed and fed that in. And all of a sudden, what comes out, if you're looking through resumes, if you're looking through screening, it's going to go through and ask, well, who's white? Who's 183 centimeters tall? Who's Dutch? Because that's the only way to be successful. So to counteract that, that's where you need to go in and help see what these models are trained on and provide it with data that helps to even it out.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, that's the negative side, right? That's the downfall. That's the risk. On the positive side, you said something a moment ago that I think is really worth sticking on, which is this idea that what generative AI does and what AI does in general is democratize the ability for people to use computers or to use technology. And you mentioned someone in their 80s using it. If I go back to the 1950s and 1960s, there was only a very small subset of people who used computers. If I go to the 80s or 90s, right, who used computers? It was nerds, it was techie people, right? And we didn't really want to be associated with them. And then along comes Apple. And Apple makes the iMac, and they put them with colors, and you can put them in your living room, and all of a sudden it's a lifestyle product, and everybody has a PC. And then you have the iPhone, and you take away the, I can't remember now anymore.
Stylus?
Huh? Stylus, thank you.
Yes.
You take away the stylus, you just have your fingers. Now everybody can start to use it a little bit more. And so what's the greatest common denominator is language, is being able to speak or write, depending on, what you can do. And so you have this whole range of individuals now that can access technology, that every step we take in technology, it allows for more and more and more people to use it because it becomes closer and closer to how we interact with people on a daily basis, how we interact with people when we have a meal with them. And so it opens up technology to so many more people. So now you want diversity in your organizations, you can have it more than you have ever had it before, because it's not about what you know on the technology, it's about what you know on your mind and how you can apply that. So that's what I would say to pass it back over.
Well, you brought up you brought up an example that's actually quite close to my heart, and I want to bring in Ayad on this. So Ayad, we know that corporate culture will eat everything else for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We know the saying. And one of the corporate cultures can be corporate cloning.
Corporate what? Sir?
Cloning. And I remember from my days as a young engineer in PDO and in Shell. And I think a lot of people will resonate with this, is your successful person is slightly aggressive, generally speaking a male, and is a go-getter, yeah? Won't take no for an answer, extremely perseverant. Well, we're actually saying, hang on a second, let's stop this corporate culture by using AI. So who will eat who now? Is it the corporate culture or is it the AI?
Yes.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'd like to start on the biasness of AI and people who are aspire to eliminate biasness in AI. I think this is a far-fetched concept. What probably will happen over the next few years, we see more regulations and laws to basically put the guardrails and the boundaries for things, but will not eliminate biasness. The second thing is there will be parallel technologies which will identify the nature of the biasness which is coming from whatever model is there. There will also be disclosures around things. So yes, you're given whether an opinion or a judgment, but there will be disclosure. What is the source data for this? Yeah, so I think that is where potentially things will go. So you're aware if you're taking an input from AI and further inferring the information for other users. But it will, just the idea, the concept that we're going to eliminate biasness, it is far-fetched. When it comes to corporate culture, I think it is, I can't today see that AI will be eating corporate culture by anyway. Corporate culture will remain corporate culture. And the culture you mentioned, by the way, I thought at some point probably those are the best people, the aggressive and, today I don't think so. I've changed my opinion. I think things will evolve. AI will impact corporate culture, not because corporate culture needs to change, but it is the nature of jobs will change. It will, things which people thought are important will be just automated and will be done with AI. And so just the fact that the nature of jobs changing, that will impact corporate culture one way or another. By the way, if you look, on the personality side of things, I mean, who is actually working on AI? It is mostly the introverts. This is probably the first time we see introverts taking over the extroverts in the world. Yeah? So, it used to be a world of extroverts setting the rules. It is now introverts coding and introverts, putting all this data together. How is that going to reflect on the overall population? And you know the nature of, the analytical part of the introverts, their judgment, etc. So, yes. So if you're looking at that aspect, what type of personalities will get recruited for what type of companies? Definitely, I see some changes in the corporate culture.
Joe, you seem to have some burning comment on the introvert issue. But listen, it's not about the introverts. It's about people who are coding.
Well, it wasn't necessarily about introverts. I was thinking, yes, perhaps the people who build this are introverts, but you can think of AI as a child who is learning, right? And so what is this individual learning from? The images that it sees, videos, text,
indeed.
right? All of this. So I think while it may have started in one way, it's going to grow up in a different way. So to your point of culture, I think culture is always going to reign supreme, but what you can do in terms of AI is confront the culture that you have. I think for any company, it's very easy to say the words of maybe we are diverse, but then if you start to look at the data that it's being presented to you, are you, right? It may challenge you in different ways, but that may be great because at that point you can say, how do we actually solve some of these problems that we weren't even aware that we had? And so, yeah, I think that's the way that you can use this to adjust culture, but that's also the way that you need to be careful of it, that it doesn't absorb the negative parts of culture that hopefully you want to disengage with.
Fabulous. Shukran, Nick. All right, I would like to open up the floor for any questions from the attendees. If you have any questions, perhaps there is a mic that is lying around and...
The mics are available. Our volunteers have the mics around. If anybody has any questions, please raise your hand so they can come to you. We have a question up here. Can I get a mic? Please keep your hand up. Where are my mics?
You can take
there
one
is
from
one here.
Yeah, there's one here too. Here.
Perfect.
عرف بس بنفسك لو سمحت طويل العمر.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
عزان الكندي, co-founder of a startup.
والنعم عزان.
I have a question about DEI and the sort of bad rep that it gets from it marginalizing the people who are, in some cases, were mainstream. In the West, it's white people. In here, maybe it's something different, males. And how do we overcome that marginalization of the mainstream people?
Can I comment on that?
Sure,
Yeah.
go ahead. That's fine.
You were asking me before about some of the tools that Shell uses. So maybe, I'll give some examples of what would be some of the things that we are doing just to kind of like try to eliminate. It's sometimes really impossible to completely eliminate, but to attempt to eliminate bias when it comes to hiring, when it comes to learning as well, when it comes to inviting different kind of learning appetites and different styles of learning to the organization or within the organization. So one of the things, for instance, that we use is a tool called Bing, which basically what it does, it tries to exclude words that would include bias in job descriptions, and therefore it would invite different sets of people to actually compete for such roles. And it wouldn't be specific to certain, for instance, gender or certain kind of like cultural background and so forth. We also use another tool called Mural, which is a training platform. And what it does is that it actually allows collaboration. It addresses different kind of learning styles. And therefore, it allows people to actually, contribute and add their perspective in an environment that is safe, in an environment that allows people with different styles, different personality sets to contribute or to provide their input. Another one, which probably is something to look forward to, is something I think His Excellency alluded to, which is around things like, for instance, harassment, bullying, and discrimination. In so many occasions, people at times find it difficult to interact with another human, to actually speak up and share their issues around it. So allowing a tool like AI would probably take away the fear of speaking up and allow individuals to kind of like, share these instances that actually happened to them. To continue to eliminate, we need to invite different sets of the population, different sets of the community to participate so that you have good quality data that would allow that continuous elimination to actually happen.
Shukran, Asma. Azan, I hope that addresses your question. All right, so we have a question right down the middle here.
Yeah. We've got someone heading that way. Please keep your hand up.
Keep your hand up.
Because you get lost in the middle. We'll
yeah.
take that question first. We've got just about 5 minutes left.
So maybe a question or two, and then we can wrap up. All right.
Yeah, I'm Ahmed Al-Maimani, DE&I specialist at Omantel.
Interesting.
Just I got one question. How organizations or companies can audit their AI systems and processes in order to avoid the biases and their processes to be inclusive, to avoid the problems of biases and breaching the privacy aspects?
So Nick, is there any way this data can be treated and retreated such that biases are avoided in the future? Joe? Joe, yes.
Yeah, so yes. With any large language model with generative AI that you roll out within an organization, if that comes from Microsoft, Google, Amazon, one of the massive providers, there will be a series of tools that you can go in and start to test out these models and understand how you may need to tweak them. As you were mentioning, whether that's looking for words or whether that's looking for bias in the data. So before you roll these tools out, you do have a series of controls and training that you can go through to adjust it. Just because you get one of these tools out of the box does not mean you should use it as it is out of the box. I think we see this with every piece of software that any enterprise company deploys. This is just a little bit of a different model on how you deploy it. So I think that would be the first thing. And then the second thing is, as you deploy it and as you roll it out, collect feedback on it. A lot of times you think about rolling out software and you do training and you do education for it. But not a lot of times do you think about, well, let me get feedback on this, expense tool, on this travel tool, for example. You don't care about feedback, you care about training, you care about people using it. In this case, it's a completely different type of software, so you do need new types of processes to roll it out. So yes, there are ways to manage it, and then I would say the last thing is, as you feed it in your own company's data, it will learn from that as well. So that is another way to deploy it. In terms of privacy, when you deploy something in your company, it doesn't sprawl out and take over everything. You can deploy it on specific servers with specific data. So there are ways to sandbox it and protect it against other data.
I think
I know Abu Abdullah has a question, but let's hear Ayad's comment, and then we'll come to you, Abu Abdullah.
When it comes, it's only a continuation of what John
right.
have. It's actually, I think John have said you can manage it. From my perspective, I would say yes, you can manage it, but in real life, if you can as well remove the biasness from the human, then you can do it with AI.
So which one comes first then?
Because you cannot remove it from the human, then you cannot remove it from the AI. It's a mimic of actually the human behavior.
Cycle then, is it sort of a thing?
Then you have to live with it and minimize it and manage it, but not remove. And that's why the pattern and the AI, it depends a lot on the learning and how much we learn it in a fair, ethical way to get the data as much as possible away from being a binary.
Indeed, indeed.
So it's a reflection of the mindset of the human, which is, again, we have to live with that biasness. We cannot remove it.
Very interesting.
I think if I go to the question directly, which is to do with audit, anything you audit against a standard. Yeah?
Yeah.
Today, the standards are not in place. This whole domain is evolving. Over time, we will see regulations, standards, etc., and audit practices as well. We saw the same trend with ESG, which is a big topic as well today. Things evolved over the years, and people don't want. Today, we see this, the contradiction where you want things to go ahead, but you want to put regulations. We know regulations are going to slow things down. So, a lot of countries are very cautious on what regulations to put before things evolve and develop. So,
True.
I think over time we'll see standards coming, and they will give us some guidance on how to audit whether AI with regards to diversity or otherwise.
Wonderful.
Amar,
Assalamu
there's
alaikum.
one more question that was here.
We
Let's
can
just
take one
that.
last question?
Yes, please.
Will you allow us, Murtada?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Nahla al-Blushi from Central Bank of Oman.
أهلاً أهلاً.
I have a question with regard to what was discussed. Now we are talking about AI kind of replacing a human being when it comes to, discussing things that we cannot maybe talk to a human. But also we need to take into consideration the data privacy. We do have some sort of regulations, so we need to look at that aspect as well. The other aspect that I wanted to mention is when we start, kind of making our AI solutions into learning modes, we need to also concentrate on what culture this tool is being used in, because sometimes we do have different cultures. So what happens maybe in the States is different than what happens in Oman. So if we talk about, for example, international companies, something like Shell, most probably some of the tools are being utilized, are brought from Shell. So it might not be relevant to Oman. So we need to take these aspects into considerations as well. Thank you.
Asma, you would agree with that? I mean, there were two parts to her question,
Yeah.
or to her comments. First one was, I think you started with, AI replacing humans, and I'm not really sure if that's happening anytime soon, at least. I think the experts have told us that it's not, the thing that we need to worry about immediately. But probably more on to your second point, that we need to keep, the culture in mind before we start importing tools. Generally speaking, I would agree with that, but as Engineer Saeed mentioned, we can't really remove biases in AI until we remove biases in humans, and that's, again, a challenge. So, but do you keep that in mind when you're using the tools that you're using in Shell?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I maybe just want to add that when you think about an international organization, you probably kind of like link that with the West. But the reality is we are an international organization that exists in so many countries and includes so many cultures, includes so many diverse kind of backgrounds, and therefore these tools represents the organization, different sets of cultures, different sets of countries, and so forth, and it allows people to basically provide that perspective.
So I think that this is an agreement. I mean, yes, we need to keep in mind the culture before we start using tools, but because the culture in Shell is so
quite
diverse,
diverse,
I mean, it works in
absolutely.
many, many countries in all continents.
Yeah.
That is indeed happening as a matter of fact.
It is, and it's an agenda that we actually promote quite aggressively because
Okay.
we do believe in it. Now, as we said, we cannot replace humans with AI, but we can only augment it, but really be cautious and thoughtful around how to balance the ethical, the governance component in building all of these different tools.
ممتاز. شكرا جزيلا.
I think just Amr on this one.
Where is that?
هنا.
Oh, I'm looking at the audience and
Just at this point,
Yeah.
I mean, probably Shell is more international and, it reflects many cultures, but let's talk about our culture and let's be upfront with this.
okay.
There are certain tools which are built by certain people from different cultures, and, they come, and we do see that happening in different companies where I'm involved, either as a board member or as an executive, etc. And we put very clear lines on the cultural aspects. And at times, many of these companies or service providers, they push you to say, listen, these are things we adopt as an organization. And we tell them, thank you very much, that's what you adopt, but we adopt our own culture, and we are proud of it. This is not specific to our culture, could be any culture anywhere in the world. I think culture is a beautiful thing. People need to keep their cultures and preserve that, and need to push back on this specific dominating view of the world, and basically superimposing a specific culture and view of the world on everyone else. That is not how we should operate.
So the onus then comes back to our leaders and our decision makers to adapt what we think is right for us, and not necessarily let perhaps partner organizations push towards us.
Agreed. I think it's, we need to be adamant that what do we want? Are we happy with our culture, or we are not? And if we are happy, we need to also put that opinion forward and push back on certain aspects, And again, this is not specific to our culture. I think all the countries are happy with their culture, are proud. They need to push back on agendas which come from, which are not necessarily, you cannot adapt to.
Yeah.
And the law of the land does not allow you to.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, I would like to end by thanking the esteemed panel members. I think we've lost His Excellency, but a big thank you to His Excellency who took time joining us today. Joe, Ayad, Asma, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.